everybody who doesn't know the other lady on the side of the screen, this is Jenn Hart. She is, you're a solo, like you're just Jenn Hart.
All
Like,
me. Yep.
I love it. But
Just me.
so I love that perspective because I think you're one of the ones on our panels that is just you. And so I think there's a lot of people who can relate to you because they're not building a team. They don't want to build a team, or maybe they just haven't yet. And so Jenn is with Coach House Realty, and she's been a friend of mine for a while, and I learned so much about you. So for those of you who don't know Jenn, I'm going to let her kind of tell you her background, where she started, how long she's been in the business, and then how do you get business currently? Like, what is your business model?
Sure. Well, good morning, and thank you for having me. I was a high school English teacher and school administrator for 14 years. And got really burnt out from that. And when I turned 40 a while back, I was like, life is too short to just dread going to work every day. And so I went into real estate, and I was lucky enough to fall into a Buffini class like right away. So I implemented those things like pop buys and referral based marketing from day one, which was kind of lucky. It's not something I tried to apply retroactively.
Right.
But in terms of building my business, I started out with referral based, doing pop buys, doing client gifts and client events, and trying to really get to know my clients on a very personal level. And most of them have become friends over time. And I was thinking about this the other day. I was looking at my third quarter, and so many of my original clients, I've been in 9 years now in real estate, and so many of my very original clients from that first year in real estate are still using me, still referring me. And so when I was thinking about the shift and I was thinking, what should I do? I was like, I'm doubling down on my people. Like, I've always kept in touch with them periodically, but I'm doing more this year, like, because they have been so good to me. And that's such a rewarding way to get business, that I'm doing extra things this year. And I went a whole year out in terms of planning for marketing and just doing more in-person things with them.
I love that. So you've built your business by just being you and loving on people. And now I love that you just said, like, in preparation for a shift or a different market than we've been in over the past couple of years, that you have decided to actually go more into it versus backing away, where I think some people are saying, well, I can't do enough. I can't do the client events because they cost a lot of money, or I can't do as many pop buys because I don't know where the money's going to come from. Your approach is go all in because you need them to show up for you, and you need to be in front of them more. So when they do have people, if it's not them, they do have people, they can give them up.
They have never let me down. And I remember when I first got in the business, I had, a few closings my first few months. And I remember buying really nice closing gifts for my buyers. My husband was like, oh my gosh, you're gonna go broke. You shouldn't spend all that money. And he often thinks back to that. And he was like, I was so wrong. Like, like it's an investment in a person and a relationship for me. So yes, I am spending more money than ever on my client base. And interestingly enough, I never outwardly ask for referrals. And that is, I think, a little different. At least it's different than how I was trained. I do things out of genuine love and appreciation or celebration. And I don't stand there and ask for something in return. And if I make a pop by tag, it doesn't have the word referral on it. It says happy holidays or, happy Halloween.
Whatever it is about.
Yeah. Like I would treat, like how I would want to be treated. Right. That's how I always approach everything. And I don't know, it has worked for me for 9 years. So I'm a big believer, if it's not broken, don't fix it.
I'm the same way.
Yeah. And part of my background in teaching is what led me to not ever want a team. I am decidedly solo. I had to manage teachers for a very long time as a school administrator. And it's very frustrating to me. I know that if I tell you I'm going to do something, I know it'll get done. And I know that that's a little small thinking. And It is, but I know myself, and I would drive that person crazy if I had a team. I would drive them nuts because I would be like, why haven't you done that yet? And I don't want to be that person. I have 3 teenage daughters. I got enough of that at home. So I'm me, and I'm quite happy with
But
where I
but
am.
that is amazing. You're like embracing what you know about yourself. And I think that's an important message for people of, I think when people get into real estate, it's like, oh, they do well. And then, or maybe it takes a couple years to get started and then they do well. And then they think that they have to go big or they have to build a team or they have to do this. And your message is you don't have to. You can actually be you and manage everything that you need and be very comfortable and confident in that decision. And I think that's really powerful for some people that are solo practitioners. Most people are solo practitioners, I make up in the Richmond area, to just stay that way. And I'll tell you, I've built the team. I've done the things. I've run the brokerages. And there are times, and I think people can relate to this, who's listening, and some people that are watching this, we've talked about it. I'm like, I could just sometimes just be me and be just completely fine because it carries another weight on you.
And it's also being responsible for other people. And anybody who's ever been truly broke will get this. When I started this business, I was so broke and I thought, I don't want any overhead. And I mean, I think I just in the last year got an office space at Gather. Like that was huge for me. Like I always tried to keep my business as lean as possible.
Yes.
So should hard times come, I wouldn't be broke again.
Yes.
And I didn't want to be responsible. And I don't even know enough about how teams work. Like, I don't know if you're responsible for them and their salaries or whatever, but I didn't want any part of that. I just want to be responsible for me. So
I think that's a strong message.
And I actually went and looked about where my leads come from.
Yes.
And 40% of them are past clients. 30% come from my networking group that I started in 2018. 15% are sphere and marketing, like social media. And then the last 15, and I didn't realize this until I did the math, are actually referrals from other agents.
There's a whole thing about cultivating, like that could be a whole system that you put into place of just building relationships with agents, just like you do with your clients.
Yes. And I didn't purposely do this, but there's just been agents that have asked me for help. Can you show me how you do that? And so I did, and we became friends. They were not in my brokerage necessarily. I just had an agent retire and move out of state, and she referred me her entire business.
Yes.
And this is the craziest thing. I met her. She was a listing agent. I was the buyer's agent. The night before closing, the whole house was just trashed with personal property, whatever, and a huge snowstorm was coming. And she's like, fine, I'll come clean it. I'm like, there's no way you can do this by yourself. And she's like, I'm a one-man band. And she pulls up her SUV, and I was like, yeah, it's going to take more than one. And so I ended up staying there and helping her. We became really good friends, and she sold the whole state. Whenever she needed some Richmond-based information, I would help her. And so when she retired, she was like, I want my clients to always be taken care of like that. And I was so honored. And I mean, I have had 3 listings, 2 buyers since September when she retired. Like
that's amazing. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think we get in our own way sometimes and we don't look at that as a source of business of just by creating relationships with people. And they're not everybody's gonna eventually, like when you decide to retire, or I decide to retire, like those people are still coming to you, and you can pass them along to someone, still be retired and still know that they're in good hands. Like making the relationship of being in good hands is a relationship and lead generation.
It is. And it's so easy to come from a place of service, and that can be to your fellow agents. You know, we all have the same goal, which is to close the deal. And I didn't sacrifice my clients' negotiating positions or anything by just helping everybody get what needed to be done before a snowstorm so they could close the next day. So I would say that, when you can help out your fellow agents, who knew it can actually come back?
It will come back. Mm-hmm. Yes. I've had some crazy stories like that too with clients, like not the client that we were working with, but the seller's client, like the seller, the agent that was on the other side, their client. recognized what we had done on the other end, and we got business off. It's so, I didn't market it, didn't know who the people were, didn't know any of it. And we just got one the other day where the deal never even closed. It got down to attorneys. It was nasty.
Oh.
And our clients backed out like the day of closing. And anyway, long story short, a couple years later, right now, the guy calls and he's like, you were on the other end of the transaction. And I hated you then. And now I really appreciate you because you held firm for your clients. You did the right thing by your clients. I didn't read the addendum. It had to do with mold remediation and addendum he didn't read and all the things. And so, but just serving your clients really well. And even if it means that it's not benefiting the other people because you're holding the line of what you're doing for your clients, it came back in a completely different way. Yeah. I never experienced before.
It's an amazing endorsement, isn't it? I mean, it was a little late coming, but yeah, that's great.
I told him, I was like, thank you for saying that, because that really made my day.
I bet it did. That would make my day too.
Yeah. So you just never know how you can find people that come to you just by being a good person, doing the right thing, and knowing your value, whether it's with other agents or just in what you're good at or what you want and don't want.
Absolutely. 100%.
Well, so tell me, all of your business from one way or another is from referral and word of mouth, and that's how you've cultivated it. Do you remember how you found your first client? Like, who was your first client and how did you find them?
Yes, I do. And I think I have counted that over the years, I have closed 43 deals from this one client. If you talk about, she referred me to so-and-so who referred me to so-and-so, like, wow. Gather all of that up. And this is such a lesson for anybody who ever is like, I don't want to go do that. So Shannon Milligan was going on vacation and she was in my firm and she had a lot of business. She was very nice to me. And I said, well, what happens when you go out of the country? What happens to your business? Because she's a solo agent. And she's like, heck if I know. That is one of the most stressful parts of this. And I said, well, could I cover for you? And I'm like 6 weeks in the business, right? And she's like, sure. And so she had at the time was buying Zillow leads. This was back in like 2014. Mm-hmm. And she said, anything that comes in off of Zillow that you turn, we agreed on some kind of referral rate for it. So I'm actually having lunch at my kids' elementary school. I get this call from Zillow, and it's a man who wants to see, I kid you not, a log cabin off of Jeff Davis Highway that is $60,000. Okay. So I go and I meet him and I'm like, oh, please don't kill me. Like, I'd never met somebody off the internet before. And he bought it as an investment property, and he was a solid investor, and he started buying things left and right. And so I started selling him all these other investment properties. And he and his wife referred me to tons of people. And I'm going to sell another house for them in the spring. And then they divorced. And so I had to sell off that rental portfolio, so much business. And so wow. I don't care that it was like a nothing commission after. I think Shannon might've made more than me on that. After you took out the referral fee. But yeah, show up, even if it's a $60,000 log cabin on Jeff Davis Highway.
It's fascinating to me you share that story, because as I was talking to Alexis, who was your other panel member during the thing, she had a very similar story of her first piece of business was a lead that no one wanted in Hopewell, and they were an investor, and it was like this nothing house, whatever. And then they changed their mind and they wanted to buy a $500,000 house in Midlothian. And she's like, that was my first piece of business. And I took it because no one else wanted it. Mm-hmm. And I just worked it and created relationships off of that. And I'm like, yes, that's what it takes. So for all the new agents out there that don't want to work what I call the shit business, work it, because if you do it right, you can start, that's where you cultivate. And even the open houses and the things that people don't want to waste their time doing sometimes, if you do it right, you can, it gets you in front of people, which then if you're good at creating relationships, that's what it becomes about, and you start your circle. So.
My second client, I threw her a housewarming party, and, she invited all of her sphere. We became friends, and she, in the past few years, started her own business, and she hires doctors. That's her job now. She hires doctors, and guess who she sends them to find a house. That is a client I've had since 2014. I've taken her to lunch at least once a year, mainly because I enjoy her company quite a bit. She's a lovely person. But I have sold a house to 5 of her brothers, her dad, and a step parent. Like she just, she's an A+ client, and got to take care of them for sure.
I just love that. And that's just what this mastermind is about for me, is putting together people who do business like you, who do business like Chris and John and Daniel Keaton. Like everybody has their ways that they're good at and that they have been able to grow and learn through and say what they like and don't like. So you shared a story on the panel that a lot of people resonated with the one time you did a cold call. So tell us about that.
So I have made one cold call in 9 years. And if I had to make them, I have so much admiration for the other panelists who makes them every day. I call it a FISBO. And I didn't do a whole lot of preparation. I think I ran comps, talked about the neighborhood. And I thought, I arrogantly thought, well, I'm great at talking to people. This will be a piece of cake.
Fine.
I mean, that man destroyed me in a way that I didn't know I was capable of being destroyed. And I just remember thinking, I hung up the phone, I was standing on my deck and I was like, I will never do that again. I mean, it was brutal. I was like, I don't have a script, or like, I wish I'd had a script. I was like, oh my God, what is happening? Yeah. And he hated realtors, like loathed them. And that didn't help either. And I had like a few witty comebacks, but after a while I was like, bye. Like,
yeah. And I love that, because I've done for biz as well. It depends on how you look at it too. Like you knew, I mean, that moment you're like, and I'm done. Yep. There are people out there that'll be like, okay, I'm going to do this again. And I'm going to build my mindset sometimes is like, if you tell me no, I'm going to be like, okay, I'm going to like snake charm you. Like you're going to like me somehow. I will do something for you that you like to prove you wrong. And that was part of my speech that I talked about. I was telling you about, like, I needed to like show like not everybody is who you make us out to be, and we can be very good people. And I do have some stories for that has been very rewarding. But FISBOs are not my thing either, and I know my lane. Yeah. But it was more of like, I need this person to be in my world, maybe if they're not like, mean, and show them value so they can change their perspective sometimes. Yeah. So.
Well, that's not my strength. And I think knowing your strengths and your background and what you're good at is really important in this business, and leading from a place of what you're good at, be yourself, know who you are, and go from there. And that's not my strength or who I am. So, yeah.
And I love that about you. I will say though, what I've learned in that is the message I'm not trying to get out there, because this is very true for me, is that when people are mean and ugly and just demeaning and they see no value in you, I'm not saying hold on to that, because I have fired every $1 million listing that I have taken for some reason. That's I have fired the seller client. All but one. And then when I walked into the one, I was like, here we go. Like this is and that person, it was just a gem. But every $1 million client, that's my story, I have let go. I have won it, and then they were so nasty to me that I'm like, no, I don't need this. I don't need your money. It is not worth the time, the energy, the effort, the mental capacity that you have in my brain right now. And I remember the last one that I fired was, he sent me an email on Mother's Day, and that was it for me. It was just nasty. Oh. And I was like, first of all, it's Mother's Day. Second of all, I don't need to be reading this email because you just wrecked my day. And then I'm like, and I'm done. And, it felt good to actually.
It does feel good to stand up for yourself and to say, I will not. People will treat you how you allowed to be treated. And that is so true. And if you let people walk all over you, you will get more of the same. I 100%. I applaud you for firing him.
Have you ever fired a client? That's my last question to you.
I fired 2. I fired a seller. This was my first year in the business. I brought him a full price offer, 10 days on the market. It was not a hot market. It wasn't a hot property, full price offer. And I went over to present it, and he said, absolutely not. And it turns out he had parked his truck out front and spied on all the people that had looked at the house. And he did not like the protected class of buyer. And I'm super patient and I don't get very mad. But oh my gosh, that made me mad. I mean, he was just racist. And he said, I will not sell my house to a person of this race. And I was so mad that I left. I yanked the sign out of the yard and I couldn't get the post down. So I just yanked it off. And I came back like 30 minutes later with a termination or release. I was like, we're done. I don't want to have anything to do with you. And I should have known, because a really good agent in town had the listing before me for only 25 days. And I remember thinking that was curious. And I think he went through several more, like, just, that's a hard no, like your integrity. I don't want to be affiliated in any way that feels that way about any class of people. And then I fired a buyer who was absolutely horrible. He wanted me to write up an offer on a house. He wanted me to ask for all the contents of the house, all the furniture in the house. He wanted to be able to move into the house for 6 months and then put his house on the market. And he wanted to lowball it in price by a ton. It was a beautiful home in Stonehenge. And believe it or not, I had negotiated all of that to happen as long as the price was decent. And he insisted that the price wasn't right. It was totally right. It was priced fine. And he told me to just shut up and write the offer. And I said, we are done. I was like, no, we are done. And I saw he eventually sold and bought, and my hat is off to whoever his agent is, because he was a very demeaning man. And I just was not going to stand for that.
Yeah, and I think that is power. People need to hear that you do hold power in ethical things, but B, just values for yourself and any client that is out there just thinking that we're nothing and shut up. I mean, yes, we do work for the client, but we also have an opportunity to say we don't want to work for you. So firing ourselves almost from the client because it's not a good pair. I think that's a very powerful message. Yeah. Well, is there anything that you would like to just give advice to in terms of new agents or agents who've been in the business who may be struggling, or who may, or just like, I don't know, do I stay single or do I, add another person to make a team? Like, is there any kind of advice or inspiration that you would give to somebody like just kind of lost of what to do?
So whenever there's a lull in the market, and I anticipate we're probably going to have a few of those coming up, I've tried to fill that time with something productive, getting something in place for when it picks back up. And one time it was having a real website built, which is a lot of work and takes a lot of time, and it's hard to do when you're busy. The second was starting a networking group, which is a long game, but my background in teaching made that a really natural fit. And then the other thing I did was I started collecting staging items to stage listings. So those were all things that I actually really enjoy doing, fit naturally with my strengths. And as I was sitting on the panel last week, it was interesting to me how people's backgrounds really led to things they do really well. And we talked about, it was interesting to me that Heather Valentine had a background in food and beverage and does these amazing client events. I don't know that I could pull that off without making it my full-time job. And she seemed to really do it with ease. So my advice to people would be, what do you enjoy doing? What are your strengths? And I'm talking about your hobbies, things that you just enjoy doing. And what can you do to further your business that marries those two? Because it won't feel as much like work.
Yes.
And then stick with it, because it's a long return on a lot of those things. I started a networking group in 2018, and it wasn't until 2020 that I started to really profit from it. But now it's grown to almost a third of my business. And it's really nice business. They're lovely people, like, you're attracting like-minded.
Right. You're able to help. You're doing what you like to do. You're helping them as much as they're helping you. And you're learning about, you're getting more people in your web that you can help. They can help you, and you're learning more about their businesses, and you can then use those people to connect your current people that you already have. You're just, it's one big ball of resource.
It's a win-win. And for me, it's funny when I go on vacation and other people have to run the meeting, they're like, oh my God, when are you coming back? And I'm like, what's the big deal? It's running an hour-long meeting. And, if for you, that sounds like nothing, that might be your thing. Like, what is it that you do without thinking about it. It's not that hard. It's your strength. It's somebody else's mountain to climb. And, you know, for me, cold calling is a mountain to climb that I don't want to climb, but that would be my advice. What are your strengths? What do you like to do? How can you monetize that long term?
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for being a part of this. I loved your perspective on everything. I think a lot of people will totally relate to what you're saying. And so anybody who does not already follow Jenn Hart on social media, follow her. She's a lovely lady. I love you. So
thank you, Jenny. Thanks for putting all this together. It's been really fun.
No problem. And if anybody has any questions, just let us know, but have a good evening.
See you later. Thank you.
Bye, Jenn.